about Android and iOS, we can definitely do another
Oh
session
my
on that.
gosh. Yeah. Are you on what are you on, iOS or Android? Did
So I was iOS for the last 6 years. I was Android fully before that, and now I'm back on the Android train. And I've got to say, the Pixel is a great device.
Nope. Yeah,
So
oh my
good.
gosh. Like I can go on so much about the whole iOS because I've done both. I was a iOS user for a long time, then went to Android, then went back to iOS, and like currently I'm on Android on a Pixel device and loving it. Absolutely loving it. But
Yeah, the only thing I really miss is just the Pixel Watch is dreadful, but the Apple
oh
Watch is
yeah, I
mad.
have I have one. Like it's whatever. I never had an Apple Watch, so I don't know any better. But
The Apple Watch is great because you were able to just like log into my MacBook with it and everything, and I've lost all that convenience stuff. But I mean, I'm willing to pay that price for a more open platform.
yeah. Well, and part of that's because you're on Linux too. So,
Yeah. Ironically, Android works better with Windows
yeah,
than
that's
iOS.
yeah, that's what I want.
Yeah,
You know,
the integrations there are stellar.
yeah.
People are dripping in now. Hello, Big Pod. Oven says echo. Is that me? Do I have an echo?
Oh shoot,
Someone?
I'm not hearing anything.
Yeah. And some iOS args. That's nice. Yeah. I mean, this is just going to be a therapeutic rant, I think, from the three of us, right? So,
Yeah. So Hayden, I wanted to know. Yeah. So I think. So uh, I guess if we all just like basically shared like what we work on or whatever. But like Hayden, I've never quite figured out. Are you primarily a Windows user? Like your breadth of knowledge on Linux using Linux and Unix and Windows is amazing. And like I can never really figure out like what type of user you actually are. It's like,
I mean, I use both daily. So daily driver Windows 11 with WSL, um, but I work in the cloud. I work on my own servers on Linux. Um, I mean, I've used Linux since like I was a teenager, since like circa 1999. Like
yeah,
my first Linux experience was having to rebuild the Linux kernel to support my ATI graphics card. That was my first foray
yeah.
into Linux.
This is like it's almost the same because I got into Linux around '98. It was around the time Windows '98 because like I got into computing or whatever like was really with DOS, pretty much just Intel and DOS. That's where and so I got heavily into Windows '95. I was very active in the Wear scene back then,
Nice.
and so I got into Windows 95 really early because it was all on the wares. You can get it early before it came out. So I got into Windows 95 and got super good at that. And then by the time Windows 98 came out, I was like fed up with like I could reinstall Windows so fast and reconfigure everything because I felt like I had to do it weekly because like it would just always go to crap. So I'm like, there's got to be something better. So I started looking at Linux, and so
Right.
my experience with Linux was like, I'm like, oh, I heard about this thing. Let me download it and try it out. And I spent literally about a month trying to get the Tulip driver working for my network card. And but I mean, also realized I knew nothing about programming, really nothing. It was like I spent about 2 weeks just trying to get Linux installed, and then I finally got it installed, and I got it to like boot up, and I got to the command line, like I got to the login, and then I'm like, shoot, I didn't because like Windows doesn't have a user by default. It was like I was like, what do I log in with? So then it was like I had to find out what a root user was and what the root
Right.
user. Yeah, it's like
So
no,
I actually came up on early DOS, early Windows, started dabbling in Linux, and then post XP, I kind of still fiddled with Linux, but switched to Mac. And I was pretty diehard Mac user from about 2003 to I can date it to the new MacBook Butterfly keyboard.
yeah,
So I sold my old MacBook Pro and bought the new MacBook Pro every year until the Butterfly keyboard came, and I could not stand it. So I started looking around for great keyboards, and I got a lot of recommendations for ThinkPads, and I'm like, perfect. I'll get a ThinkPad. They're really well supported on Linux. Installed Linux. But there were a handful of applications I needed at the time that needed Windows that didn't run well in Wine, and I was running VMs. And this little thing had just been announced just around 2016 called WSL. And I'm
Mhm.
like, wait, so I can have a desktop that just works, runs all my programs, but then also gives me my Linux working environment for programming. Uh, and that was it for me. So, um, David, I think before we went live, you commented how you wanted a OS that just worked, but still gave you that
Yeah.
experience on the terminal. I just
I
came at
do.
it from a different direction.
Like David,
I mean,
what are you running now? Or-
so I'm in a bit of a weird phase right now. So after the fire, I ditched all my Apple hardware, kind of in frustration with the Apple approach to the European ruling that they had to have a more open platform. And I feel that the way they made app stores work in Europe only and super expensive, the pay per install and stuff like that. I was just like, this isn't the company I want to be using their products anymore. So right now I have a nice desktop computer. I've got a new Android phone, and the Linux that I'm running is normally Nixos, which I know I'm going to get slack for.
You just went straight into advanced mode. This is
But
the problem you listened to Twitter too much of everyone who's talking about Nix these days is like just dive right into Nix.
Right.
in my
It's too
defense,
harsh.
Nixos is what I was running like 7 years ago before I went on
Oh, okay.
my Mac holiday. So, but I am trying Fedora Silverblue right now, and I'm going to kind of try and explain why. I've given talks at conferences over the years, and I talk about my desktop habits or laptop habits, which is I wipe all my devices every 30 days
Cool.
because I like the automation. I like to know that I'm never losing
Yeah.
anything over than a month. Keeps me fresh. I change things up. Uh, but with Silverblue, I don't know if I'm even going to need to do that because it's an
Yeah.
immutable operating system where I just have my home directory and everything that I need. I still use Nix. Like if I need packages, I use Nix or Flatpaks. Flatpaks are a pain. We'll get into that as we kind of go through the flow of the motions here. But I'm really impressed with Silverblue. It's essentially CoreOS, but for desktop computing. And
Yeah.
George, who was in the chat, I don't know if he's still here because he says he'll need to catch up
That's
with the
okay.
recording. But he has a uBlue. He works on the uBlue project, which is like
Yep.
trying to make it Silverblue more developer friendly and for Ubuntu expatriates. I don't even know what that means, but it comes with some pretty awesome defaults.
I don't
Like things.
understand that either, too. What exactly is the Ubuntu flair that they're adding? But it's no, I like what they're doing with the
Yeah,
oh
it's the simple things that like you know. I normally disable secure boot, which I know I get flagged for too. But they make it so easy because they handle all the signing and stuff like that that it just works.
yeah
And they even configure things like using the TPM module for automatic disk decryption. And
yeah
it's all these little subtleties that just make it a more pleasant experience. And also, the fingerprint reader works on my framework laptop, which is never the case. And I don't know what magic they've done to their configuration to make that work, but I love it.
yeah.
They're doing a great job.
I think that's more of a testament to framework because they cater so much to the Linux community. Because like I would use the fingerprint reader on my ThinkPads or whatever, but it just wasn't reliable enough. Kind of drove me nuts. But
Yeah, you end up in this weird situation where you're scanning it, it says no enter password, and then
yeah,
you start typing your password, and then the fingerprint logs in anyway, and you're like, what the fuck?
yeah,
All these
yeah,
little things. And
yeah,
yeah, framework is amazing. Their hardware is great. Like I just ordered they've released a new screen, and I can hot swap that. Well, not hot swap, but I can swap it out pretty easy when it comes,
yeah,
and I'm like, this is amazing. So
yeah. So I have a serious problem when it comes to buying laptops. I almost always buy a new laptop every year. And then it's like kind of gotten worse these days because like I started getting into like Windows and AI stuff. So then it was like, oh, well, so I have a framework. It's like I've been a pretty diehard ThinkPad user. And then I got into framework because I like the fact you can swap out things. I think like
yeah,
framework's kind of like problem is ThinkPads. My impression, like I really like ThinkPads. I just think they're such a nice, like when you think about a laptop, is like what do you care about a laptop? It's like the tactile experience of like, because that's the thing you're physically touching. So you should get the one with the best keyboard, with the best feel or whatever. So it's like that's why I like the ThinkPad so much. So like framework is kind of weird. It's more practical. It's swappable. It's all this stuff, but it doesn't have the same like tactile experience. But it's not terrible. It's just like so. It's like it's a weird thing. But anyway, so I have a framework. And then in the last last month, I guess, I got a Surface laptop. But even on the framework, I was running Windows. But anyway, so let me explain my setup or whatever, like what I do, because like I got in, like I was saying, I got into Linux back like in the late '90s, and I mean I'm a diehard Linux. Like I just 100% switched to Linux. Everything I've done since then has been all of my personal and professional devices have always been Linux. Like every company I worked at never allowed Linux, like the big companies I worked at, but I just broke all the policies and hacked my way and figured out, and I always ran Linux. I did a lot of like terrible things where it's like, oh, like that was probably not a smart idea, but I was young and stupid. But anyways, so it's like, so I've always run Linux on everything. So it's like my perspective is like, one, I love Linux because I have this thing where it's like, it just drives me nuts where it's like, I want things to be a certain way. Like, and if I can't have that, it drives me nuts. I think it's just like my aversion to authority or something. It's like, so that's what drives me nuts about Mac is like, Mac is like an amazing thing, but there's just certain things that are just like, no, you just can't have that. Like, you just can't have it. And so that's why, like, fundamentally why I just will not use Mac is like, that I'll run into one thing that will drive me nuts and I can't have it and I just can't work around it. There's no hack. Whereas like Linux, Windows, there's always a hack. But anyway, so it's like for Linux, it's like I've been using it so long and I went through basically the kind of like the first 15 years of using Linux was more of your typical Linux person who like thinks it's amazing and wants everyone to use Linux. And then after about like 15 years, realized how kind of dumb it is to like preach Linux to people. And then like for the last decade, it's more like, okay, I just need this thing to work. and I just like, so I'm like, I now on Twitter is like, I'm just constantly telling people how terrible Linux is. Yet like I'm a diehard Linux user, but like I just can't help because it's like I've used it for so long that it's like there's just so many problems of like trying to get it to a larger mass market of users that like it's just so infeasible. And so it's like, I don't know. On the one hand, it's like I don't want to discourage people from trying to make Linux better, but on the other hand, I understand like the practicalities of it will probably never get across the line. Like it'll probably like it's so hard. Like Canonical had the best shot and they gave up. And so it's like I don't know where Linux, like how Linux is really gonna. So it's like it's just this niche thing. But yeah, that's like the bigger. But for me, like for Linux these days, is like it just has to work. That's my biggest thing. Is like because I use it professionally and I do everything. It's like it has to work. So I have a very kind of conservative Linux approach that like is not shiny and cool. Like everyone who's trying to get you to use Linux these days is doing like, it's like, oh, look, like this crazy tmuck setup or VelaJ or whatever, or like all the stuff that like DHH is doing, which is great. Like I'm glad to see bringing users and new exciting things, or NeoVim, like all that stuff. I don't do any of that. I'm like a really boring user. But I don't know. Like, so I wanted to actually show my setup. Like this is how I use Linux. So it's like, this is how I use Linux. And then why over the last like 6 months or so, I've actually switched to, so what I have is like, I have a desktop and a laptop. My desktop is this crazy Threadripper system that runs Linux. It's static. It's like the workhorse. And then I have a laptop and I flip like 50-50 between the two things. So it's like during the day, I'm working on the desktop and at night I'm working on the laptop. And I typically do more programming on the laptop because at night I'm not talking to people. During the day, I'm talking to people. And so my setup is like, I synchronize things between the devices so I can very seamlessly go back and forth between or whatever. But so the desktop is Linux, but the laptop is Windows. And I'm able to switch between the two and really not know any different. And that's what I've really enjoyed about Windows and WSL2 is I get my like Linux fix out of it, because the way I use it and the way I've set it up is like I almost don't even know it's Windows. I really rarely see the Windows side of it. But I get the benefits of the Windows side of it, where things generally just work better. Like for example, like I tried to join a Google Meet for this like the invite you sent out had a Meet for some reason a Google Meet. So I clicked that, and like when you log into that, it was like, oh, do you want to have us frame your like use AI and frame your head in the picture or whatever? So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Let me click that. Complete garbage. It's like slow, jittery. But this is the thing you just come to expect on Linux. It's like, whatever. It's like it's Linux. It probably works fine on Mac and Windows, but like on Linux, there's some weird thing where it's just not working right or whatever. So I don't know. So yeah. So let me actually like share my setup. I'll show you what I do. So like I'm sharing my screen, and I'll show you. Let me get this out of the way. So this is gonna be like tiny because it's just like my desktop or whatever. Let me. Oh yeah, I'll just like minimize this. Okay. So what I run. So this is my desktop. It's like what I run is Ubuntu.
Oop, sorry, that was me. My bad.
So so what I run is I run Ubuntu LTS. So again, like what I found is I really hate rolling distributions, because rolling distributions, they just mean in the Linux ecosystem, a rolling distribution just means you're going to randomly break. And so for my host OS, because like I really separate things between like what's the host OS and then what I have in my home directory. For my host OS, I want something super stable. So it's like I really like Ubuntu LTS, because Ubuntu, what I found, it has like the best compatibility with hardware from the kernel perspective. Like Fedora, I think, is an amazing distribution. Like they're doing a lot of good things, but it still does not have the compatibility, I think, that the Ubuntu kernel does. I think Ubuntu puts a crap ton of effort into just hardware device compatibility and whatnot. So anyway, so I run LTS, and so like I haven't even switched to 2404 yet, because it was more of like I'm gonna hold off and wait till that stabilizes a little bit, because again I don't want to be screwing too much with this. But so what I run is I technically someone with their motorcycle or something. So this is Xubuntu, but I think I technically install Ubuntu, because like I'll do an Ubuntu minimal install and then just do the Xubuntu desktop package or whatever. But for the most part, like the packages that I have installed on the host are just Xubuntu. Like I don't really actually touch apt that much. Like I'm a pretty diehard, like I use brew for pretty much everything. So it's like I use brew in my home directory, because like what I found over time was that like if you keep your host OS super stable and you never touch it, like it needs to supply like the base graphical environment. So XFCE comes from it. Like I keep that super stable, and then I have all the crazy bleeding edge development stuff in my home directory. So brew is pretty much a rolling Linux distribution. It gives you the latest and greatest of everything. So it's like I like that setup. So it's like my home directory, latest and greatest, the host, super stable. And this is like why I also kind of appreciate like Silverblue, and because like Silverblue, or what like Bluefin is doing, like they're kind of doing this like implicitly to a certain degree, where it's like the host and the applications are really completely different distributions, because Flatpak brings in its own distribution. But so the way I do things is like I have this is actually, it's XFCE, but you can see there's like nothing. Like I don't like I don't have a like a dock. I don't have a start menu equivalent thing or whatever. It's like all I ever do is if I want to run something, I hit like hotkeys, and basically I can launch things. This is just built into XFCE. So if I want to start an application, I can do it that way, but the vast majority of the time I launch things from the terminal or whatever. I'm a very basic user in terms of like I don't do fancy like the way I do terminals is I just do tabs in a terminal browser. Like I've never got on the Tmux train. I keep it very, very simple. The same thing with Vim. Like I'm a diehard Vim user, but I don't like I never got on NeoVim. Like I just keep like everything's just super basic or whatever. So it's like all I ever really do in Linux is like for the most part I'm running. I have a terminal. I run my IDEs, which I use JetBrains for everything. Actually, I think I already have it running here. I use JetBrains for pretty much all of my development. And then for a browser, where'd that go? Oh, yeah, it's over here on the screen. So for a browser, let me put it over here. I actually use Edge, which is weird because I switched to Edge in the last like 6 months to a year. I switched to Edge, and it was in my story there's like I've used Firefox forever. Like I love Firefox. I hate Chrome. I've always hated Chrome for the same reason that like I don't like the fact that Chrome locks down the user experience. It's like there's certain things you can't change. It's not as configurable. So I love Firefox. But Firefox has fallen behind Chrome for some time now. Like everyone develops for Chrome. So I've always been jealous of the Chrome users of like, I kind of wish I could run Chrome, but like Firefox was just fit my personality better. And then I discovered Edge, which this is one of the things I appreciate about Microsoft in general is like they make everything configurable. So I kind of get the compromise of like, it's not as flexible as Firefox, but they allow you to tweak, like the out of the box experience, I think with Edge is horrific, but they allow you to basically like turn off all the features, tweak whatever you want. There's flags. You can find some setting. And so like I ended up with like, this is the Edge. Like I actually like it. So I switched to Edge. And so it's like, so my setup is like primarily I'm running, I got a terminal, I run IDE, and I have a web browser. Those are the main applications I use. And then what I've found is like, I don't really use any native Linux GUI applications. The only GUI applications I use are all proprietary. And it's like, I just over time, I've just realized this or whatever. So it's like, because it's like, I'll run, it's like, I've got Slack, Zoom, what are the other ones? Maybe Spotify, Discord. But basically, you see, every single GUI application I run is proprietary, and like basically, like you'll be extremely hard pressed, and see if anyone disagrees with me, to find a Linux GUI application that is in fact better than a Mac or Windows equivalent. Oops, can I go stand up? No, I can't. So it's like. So this is like my kind of like my whole experience is like I'm primarily like just in these apps, and I don't really do a lot. It's like I just program and I'm on Twitter. That's like my life on computers basically. Okay, so like this is my Linux setup, and so you can see like so I got into the. I see. I have a panel up here. This is the XFCE panel. This is one thing I appreciate about XFCE. It's way more configurable than people think. Like the out of the box experience with XFCE is kind of like archaic and weird and ugly, but you can very easily tweak it. And so this is the way I've done things. And so what I do is I make this panel the exact same size as the window title, so it just kind of blends into it. So it's super slick. And I started doing this because of Ubuntu's Unity. Is I really liked the way Unity would do this. Is they would blend the applications bars into the top, and so you get like the amount of screen real estate that's taken by the bars or whatever is like almost nothing. So I really liked this approach or whatever, and so that's how I've been running like my XFCE or whatever. But yeah. So that's like my Linux setup, and I'll show you the Windows one or whatever. But it's like I don't know if you have any like questions or anyone. People are asked like Bash or ZHS. I'm Bash. Like I've just such a like I don't understand why people like I'm kind of curious of like why people like one most Mac users, as far as I know, use ZSH because it's the default. The second reason people use ZSH is because of the fancy command prompt. Like you can do and you make it look pretty, right? But you can see like this is my command prompt. I just don't care. I don't get a significant amount of value out of customizing that. The other thing, like just kind of personalities wise, is for me is like I'm really bad at organization. Like there's a lot of like Linux users who love tiling window managers. And they're a lot more, I just feel like they're a lot more organized in how they approach things. Cause it's like, oh, look, I put this app here and I put this one here, and they're much more intentional. I'm not, I'm just like, the way I work is like, I'm constantly like opening up new windows and creating a couple more tabs. And I've got a couple more. So it's like, I love the chaos of a floating window manager. Although I still do things like, I can do like various types of tiling or whatever. Like it's just built into XFCE. But what I've found over time for myself is I don't find tiling to be valuable most of the time. Like I don't know. I just don't. Because like the only time where like logically tiling makes sense to me is development. But I'm also I use IDEs. Like I'm not like there's a whole realm, it's like VS Code is like really editor plus, and so is NeoVim. It's like editor plus. And so there's a lot of people who like, they like tiling, but those people who like tiling tend to gravitate also towards like NeoVim or terminal-based approaches, where it's like an IDE just gives you the same thing as tiling, right? It's like I have an editor here, I have a terminal down here. If I really want, so it's like I just don't have any like use for it or whatever. Okay. So, all right. I don't know.
I think we are like the exact opposite person. Like 100 everything.
Yeah. So that's the thing is like that's the thing about Linux is like this is what I like about it. It is like, this is my personality, and this setup matches my personality, which is like completely opposite. And then what I've found within the Linux community is I actually don't know many people who would agree with me. Within the Linux community, it tends to go the other way of like, people love like tiling window, suck less, like all the like DWM, i3, those type of things, or they love tmux. And it's like, so that's where it's like, I feel like I don't fit in with the Linux users, because I'm just like, no, I don't like all that like geeky cool stuff. Whereas most Linux users do. It's like they also like Nix. They're like, it's like Nix is like engineer catnip. Like it's like, ooh, it's cool. But
yeah, I can't go more than an hour without trying to tweak something in my dot files, my ZShell config, my fish config, whatever, trying new software, and just I spend 50% of my time doing some work and 50% of my time just fucking around, changing.
So that's the thing is like, I do that. Like, so I'm constantly installing distributions, trying out things, like fooling around with that, fooling around with Neo, like all of those things I do, but I typically do those in a virtual machine. So I don't screw with my, because it's like, I don't know. It's like, I've got to work. I have a boss. I have to deliver things. So it's like, I can't screw with my default setup or whatever, but like I'm constantly, so it's like, I've got VirtualBox, VMware, and Virt Manager all installed on this machine because different hypervisors seem to do a better job with different things. And so it's like I'm constantly running different like virtualization. I'm always trying out different distributions. But this is what I've stuck to. And so I started getting interested in Windows about, it's been a couple of years where I've been kind of like, theoretically, like I've been trying to see like, can I move to Windows? Because I already know I can't survive in Mac, but like maybe Windows I could. And the reason why I started to like think about that is like the setup that I'm showing you is like the setup that I've had for over a decade. And the reason like is it works. It works extremely well for me. Like I have no complaint. It just works. But that's also boring. It's like I want shiny new things. But like whenever I try out shiny new things in Linux, I can't find a new thing that works for me. Like when I started in Linux, like I went through these different eras of like I was using GNOME and KDE. I spent a lot of time in IceWM, which is a very weird window manager. And then I spent a significant amount of time in Enlightenment, like E16. So that was kind of like, that was the peak of my Linux coolness, was like E16. Um, but then I found XF, and then I started fooling around with Unity, and I actually liked Unity, although all of the Linux people hated Unity. I actually really liked it. So I liked Unity, and I had a weird, like, bastardized version of it because it was compiz under the hood. So it was like you could do all the cool compiz stuff. And so it's like I kind of sort of ran Unity, but it was heavily tweaked with the compiz stuff, so it was completely different. But then Ubuntu abandoned Unity, which had the side effect of basically killing compiz. Is that how you say it, Hayden? I don't know how you say. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like had the side effect of basically killing that project. So then I was abandoned. I was like, well, crap, what am I going to do going forward? And then so that's when I ended up switching to XFC. But I've been basically stuck on X. So I spent all this time like switching my desktop environment. Well, once I found XFCE, and it's worked so well for me, it like kind of set the bar so high that whenever I try something else, it's just not as good. And then this is where my frustration with the Linux community now comes in. It's like, is the fact that like whenever things get to the point where they're like, oh, it's almost there, they go and rewrite it. Like that's what happened with GNOME 3. And then this is what's happened with Pop! OS, was like I was following Pop! OS where I'm like, Pop! OS is the new thing. Like that's what I'm going to end up switching to. Like I want to switch to Pop! OS because it was so good. They were doing such a good job. And then they're like, we're going to rewrite it, which I'm like, fine, I understand. GNOME shell is kind of a disaster. So like, fine, rewrite the shell. But now if you look at what the Cosmic Project is doing, is they're rewriting everything. They have a new terminal, they have an editor, and it's just like, holy crap, like, no. Like, you're so close, and you're not, like, are you going to get there now? So that's where it's like, this is my frustration, is it's just like, so I have a setup where it works extremely well, but as a nerd, I want something new, but I can't get something new because everything else sucks. So it's like, I don't know what to do. So like that's why I started looking at Windows, where it was like, I don't know, maybe I can get Windows to work.
So Windows is your new DE.
It is. So let me show you. So I'll show you. So it's like, you've seen what my Linux environment looks like. So now, so what I've done is, hopefully this is still set up. So I bought this. I started using Windows on my Framework laptop, and then I just recently bought this Surface laptop, and it's beautiful. This is an amazing laptop. I'm not much of a fan of the aluminum because it just makes it super heavy, but it has a very premium feel. So it's like if you like the feel of a MacBook, this is like a MacBook replacement. But the ARM processor is amazing in it. It's so cool. I've yet to really tap the powers of the AI stuff, the built-in NPU. But anyway, so I have that. So what I've done, let me see if this is working right.
Yeah. Have they done the benchmarks yet on that Snapdragon chip? Like, does it actually compete with the M3 from Apple?
Straight up does. Yeah, it does.
Awesome.
It delivers pretty much all the promises. Where it's like performance-wise, I think there's M3s that are faster, but for the most part, it's like between M2 and M3. The battery life seems to be better than the Apples. From all the benchmarks, my personal experience is like, I was on Intel devices for a long time, or Intel chips or whatever. So like my last Intel was a 12th gen Intel, which apparently was the best one. After that, apparently they've just gone to crap, like reliability and stuff, I guess. But so I was on a 12th gen Intel, and I switched to an AMD. The framework I have is an AMD, and I was blown away with the AMD processor. And like, this is way better than the Intels. It was faster. The built-in GPU is better. The battery life sucked though.
It's 6 hours I get if I'm lucky when I'm coding.
Yeah, so it's like, it was really cool. Like the AMD was way faster, but the battery life sucked. Okay, so now I switched to the Surface. The performance between the AMD and the Surface laptop is like negligible. Like I don't notice any difference. I'm guessing maybe the Surface is faster, but it's like I didn't feel like I was limited by the AMD, to be honest. Like performance wise, I didn't feel like I got enough performance out of it. So I didn't feel like I was already so like with the Surface laptop and the ARM processor, like I also don't feel that way too. And I have 64 gig of RAM. I can still run, VMs and all this other stuff. And so I'm super impressed with performance. But then on the flip side is the battery lasts. So it's like, it's amazing. Like you can get, like, if you're not coding, whatever, you can get like, I don't know, 15 hours or something like that. I don't know. I do a very intensive development or whatever. And I don't know. I get enough hours that I can go through a day without really having to charge it. Because I'm typically just sitting on my laptop. So yeah, the laptop I have
Is the Surface fanless?
Well,
That's another big complaint about my
Well,
framework.
no.
The fans are so noisy.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The framework, it's noisy and it's hot. Holy crap! That thing gets hot. No, so the Surface, it's not fanless, but they won't turn on for the most. I mean, like they do turn on if you are really pegging it, because like I do, it's like whatever. I was compiling LLVM from scratch the other day, and that takes like hour. Well, I had a weird issue where it wouldn't, but so it's like you can turn the fans on, but they're pretty quiet. But generally the device is silent and cool. It's like it's not hot at all. It's a really impressive laptop. So I do have the latest Surface. They call it the Surface Copilot Plus PC, which is terrible branding. But so I have the brand new latest one, the top of the line one, which was like, it's 64 gig. It's like the black like developer. There was a special like brand new edition one or whatever. I don't know. Like when I bought it, honestly, when I buy most laptops, I kind of just scale everything all the way up to the top. It's like, I want the fastest and best thing.
I love that about, I'm going to just say all developers, is that we always go for the top of the line spec everything, and then we sit in our terminal with Vim open, and I'm like,
yeah,
Right.
yeah. But I do have since I've been doing Go development for so long, I at least have the excuse that Go does a good job of using all the cores in compilation. So, although how often are you really compiling? But that's my excuse of why I need all the cores. Okay, so let me show you. So I'm going to switch over. So this should be on this side. Okay, so this is RDP. I got an RDP setup. Okay, so I'm doing remote desktop to that laptop, so you can see my setup. Okay, so this is again, so very similar setup. I use a black background. Like I only work in black or very dark gray. And so what I have a very similar minimal setup. Like I don't like, it's the same thing as like, I don't like a dock or anything like that. So I just hide it. I never see the taskbar. If I want to switch between, like, I do the same thing in Linux. It's like, if I want to find programs, I just alt tab. And then, it's like, if I want that. So it's like, that's how I know whatever I'm doing. Okay. So very minimal setup. So when I launch Terminal, it just defaults. Oh, did this shut down? Oh yeah, it probably shut down it's shut down the WSUB out too. It's normally doesn't take this long. So why the heck is this? Okay. So when I launch the terminal, I just get Linux. So it's like I have the exact same like Linux setup here. So it's like, so I just run Linux. So now when I go and I run so I wouldn't typically click here or whatever, but it's like, so if I run, like I was saying, like I use JetBrains tools. So when I go and I run, I'll click it down here. When I run JetBrains here, this is running in WSL2. It is not running natively on Windows. Like I do nothing in Windows. Like I just, like everything is in Linux. Oh yeah, I don't know why I did that. So this is like, this is mind blowing to me. So they're doing remote desktop. So the way this works is they're running, this is running through X Wayland. So I'm running X, which then goes through X Wayland, and then Wayland, they then translate Wayland to RDP, and then they show RDP, like, so this is technically like a windowless RDP screen sharing. Like RDP has the ability, to just do one window, like not the whole desktop. So it's like, so this is the crazy thing is like, is there so many layers of madness going on here? But it works incredible. Like it's surprisingly responsive and works well and stuff. And so it's like, I'm doing my development in here. And it's like, I do notice if I switch from Linux to Windows is like the response time on this is slightly less. It's not enough that it's like it's not enough that like it causes a problem, but it's just like Linux and XFCE is so ridiculously fast. Like there's just really nothing, so like response time is really fast. So I do notice, but like I don't have any. So it's like, so the way I work is like, so it's like my Windows setup here is, oops, that's weird. Is like, it's not really. So it's like, it's not really any different in that I've got basically kind of the same things. I have a terminal, I have the browser, and and I'm using the exact same Edge setup or whatever. So it's like the exact same experience, but I happen to be in Windows. And like what I was saying before is like GUI apps that I run, they tend to all be proprietary things. So all of those same apps that I ran in Linux, the exact same apps exist in Windows, but they happen to work better. But it's the exact same user experience and everything. So oh yeah, and then I set up, this is Power Toys Power Run. This is how I run most everything. So it's like in let's see, in the what I was showing with in XFCE, I use like these little launcher things, which are ugly but they're functional. But in Windows, basically, I use the Power Toys Run or whatever. So I can run whatever. So like Slack, this whatever. It's the same thing everyone has. So the thing is like, it's like, yes, this is technically Windows, but it's like I never leave Linux. And the other thing is, so let me show. It's like I have this kind of this setup where I run sync things. That's syncing basically like my source directory. This is a weird arbitrary bins, and then actually like my bash, I put all my like dot files in here, and that's the way I manage them or whatever. But so I have sync things that are syncing these files back and forth. So I develop on my desktop in Linux, and then I just switch over to Windows, and I just pick up where I left off, like because everything is just syncing back and forth. And so it's like, so this is the thing is like I've been blown away at that like because like I really like my XFCE setup that like I mimic the exact same thing in Windows, and I still get Linux. And the cool thing about WSL2 is like it's very open, the whole platform, where it's like if I want to do crazy weird things like compile a custom kernel and do stuff, like you can do it too. Like they don't lock down anything. Like it's all open. It's surprisingly open. So it's like so it's like my brain doesn't really know that it's Windows, and things just generally work better. And it's like, so I don't know. So like this is like the setup that I use or whatever. And I don't know. I'm pretty darn happy with the Windows. So it's like I'll probably stick with this where it's like I have Linux on the desktop and Windows on the laptop, because from a laptop perspective, it just works significantly better. Like I'll give you like another example of something that drives me nuts. It's like full disk encryption on a laptop. I want full disk encryption because like I use it for work. It's a good security thing or whatever. Full disk encryption in Linux drives me nuts. Like because like it never, like there's all these weird caveats and issues. So you can do like the full disk encryption, which then Linux will require you to type a password on the boot manager, or you can do the home directory encryption, which is integrated with the login, but then there's other trade-offs of performance and whatnot, and what eCryptFS or whatever the current thing is. I haven't been following it for a while. I don't know what the current way people are encrypting things. But like in Windows and Mac, it's like you just flip the setting and it works. It's like it's just on. Like, so those are the things that like I like about like being like in the Windows. There's all these things that like just kind of work that you forgot about in the Linux land. Like I really like biometric login. So it's like that Surface laptop just does Face ID. I open it up, it scans my face, I'm logged in. I never type my password. Like I like fingerprint and I try to use it in Linux, but it sucks most of the time. But it's like those things, they just work. Like they just work. And so it's like, I don't know. So.
Are you using?
Yeah, sorry, on you go.
Are you using systemd in WSL?
Yes, because like, you just can't avoid it. So I hate it. You can see like I don't even know why I have Snap. Oh, what am I doing? Like, man, I feel bad. I almost always uninstall Snap, but there's Oh, I know why. I was trying to do something with Chromium, and because I found out that like because this is an ARM laptop, so Windows on ARM works surprisingly well. You very don't really notice that you're using ARM, except for gaming. Gaming kind of sucks. But Linux on ARM, you run more issues, and so specifically the issue I found out when I switched to this is there's like no upstream support for browsers in Linux. So the majority of the time, I'm running the browser natively in Windows. But I have use cases where I need to run a browser in Linux, and so like that sucks. There's no upstream ARM 64 browsers that I'm aware of. You have to install open source stuff, and then you have all other issues.
Yeah, Google Chrome for ARM, I think, is in beta. But
For Oh really? I'll
yeah,
I'll check that out because like I guess I would have for what because I was trying to do browser automation type stuff, and so for
nice.
browser automation, Chrome is actually the desirable thing. But I couldn't even find Chrome. But maybe if I went to the beta or developer channel or something like that because I couldn't find it.
Yeah,
But yeah, I do run systemd, which is annoying, but not really because like the thing is like as much as I complain about systemd, like all my complaints about System D are more of like I just think it's a terrible architecture and design, but functionally it works. Like it works, and the thing is like if you actually like drink the Kool Aid on System D and go 100% in on System D, it's a pretty slick system. Um, it's just like as like a grumpy old Unix user, it's different, you know. So it's like it's hard to accept, but you know, whatever, it works. So like it doesn't really cause much problems running System D because System D is really lightweight in general. The biggest issue I ran into, but was I got into some weird. For some reason, System D was trying to manage my DNS, which was like the worst thing ever. Um, but I fixed that or whatever. So yeah. Oh yeah, and I run Docker just directly in WSL. I don't use Docker for desktop. I don't understand the value of it on Windows. Like I just run Docker, so it's like whatever. Um, but yeah, so it's like with WSL too. It's like you can do Docker and Kubernetes and all your fancy stuff. Like I was chatting with someone recently on Twitter about like I went through this short phase where I was trying to get Chrome OS to work, and so I have a Pixel book and I have like a high end Pixel book. I was trying to get Chrome OS to work because because I was so excited about what they were doing with Crostini, which is their equivalent of WSL. It's like Linux inside of Chrome OS. Um, but they totally botched it because they locked it down. Like you cannot screw with any of the Linux stuff. So they don't even allow real root, which just so it's like you can't run Kubernetes inside of the Linux that's on Chrome OS, whereas on WSL2 they do. And so like those things just like drive me nuts. It's like why'd you lock it down? But anyways, so it's like I was really hopeful for Chrome OS because I really like the stuff they're doing. It's like if you want to see like the most bleeding edge, crazy Linux stuff, Chrome OS is doing it. Like they have like the stuff they do with the kernel and the security stuff is like mind-blowingly cool. Yet they screwed up the Linux user experience, which just irritated me.
Yeah, in 2020, I tried to go full Chrome OS and I had nothing but pain with Crostini. It's a good idea, but it was frustrating because Chrome OS is Linux, but then to use Linux, I have to put it through a virtual machine
Yeah,
where there was not even any GPU support for like graphical apps, so running VS Code was just
yeah.
terribly slow and it was really frustrating. But I loved the idea of going all in on Chrome OS. And I
Yeah,
don't think they've ever really fixed that performance, at least not to my knowledge.
and this is the weird thing is like some of the best uses of Linux are from the proprietary people, which is weird. So it's like because you look at like the cool stuff that Chrome OS or Android does with Linux, and then like if you look at WSL, like the stuff they're doing with WSLG, because they have GPU pass-through support too, which is amazing. They're like it's really geeky cool what the way they're doing the pass-through support and stuff. And then like on Mac OS, the way they did like they have support for within an ARM VM. You can you can run x86 code through Rosetta, Like they do some so it's like some of the coolest stuff is actually happening with the way like the kind of the proprietary people are integrating with it. Yeah.
It's a pretty compelling setup. Like I don't know if I could bring myself to do it, but I'm tempted to just force myself on Windows 11 for a little bit, just because I want that kind of vertical integration where things do just work. That's what I miss the most about Mac, is that fine, containers sucked with Docker Desktop, but you can get around that with other things. But things just worked. And on Linux, I feel like it's like 1,000 paper cuts. Like nothing is going to like scare me away, but so it would be nice to have a day without those paper cuts.
But you think about the things, those paper cuts that you run into are like, they're not the core thing that you're using Linux. Like, well, I mean, I don't know, whatever. If you just enjoy all the, but it's like, it's all these like kind of tangential little things, audio, screen sharing, sleep, wake, Bluetooth. Like screw Bluetooth, it just never works. I've just never ever gotten Bluetooth to work well in Linux, which is ironic because the entire like Android Bluetooth stack should be written in. Maybe they have a custom stack. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. But because I'm kind of like I'm at the point like, so it's like I actively deter people away from Linux, but like because I don't try, like it's just this like personal thing where it's like I don't try to sell people. I'm like, look, you should use my setup. But I am curious of like specific, it's like for someone who like just wants things just to work, it's like why would you not try WSL2? Because you think about it from this perspective is most people are on Mac OS. And so like most developers are on Mac OS. And what Mac OS did was like they gave you a terminal that's not Linux, but it's pretty darn close to Linux. And then the community bridged the gap with Brew and whatnot and brought all the Linux ecosystem to the, Mach or whatever, Darwin stuff. So it's like, so you're getting this thing where it's like, I have this fully proprietary OS and then a terminal which is close to Linux, but not exactly Linux, but you would most likely prefer a Linux terminal. Whereas Windows gives you kind of the same thing. But I think a lot of people have just like Windows PTSD. It's just like 20 years of crap. And especially if you live through like Vista or Windows 8, which were just garbage, like those things where they just really screwed it up. But like 7 and 11 have been good. Like 10 was all right. But I really like Windows 11.
I think my challenge would be the lack of automation. I know they've got WinGet now, so like it's kind of like their version of Brew, and
So this is one thing that I've actually come to appreciate and like is I use this program called UniGet. So when it comes to Windows, the only way I install anything in Windows is through UniGet. And so you can go and you can search for whatever crap you want, like Steam. And it will find it. And what this is doing is it's going across all the different ecosystems of WinGet, Chocolatey, Scoop. I have some turned off because I pretty much only care about WinGet and Chocolatey. So what I do is like I'll just pick the ones that are from WinGet. So then the cool thing is this, I install everything through this, and then it's set up to auto update. So in the background, like you can see, like this is why there's errors. It's trying to update something or whatever. It will just auto update everything in the background. So it's just always upgrading everything. But then it has this thing where, let me see if I can find it. I think it's documents, WinGet. Oh, yeah. So it's backing up all the packages that I have. So it's like, it has this, if I open up this should go into VS Code probably. So it has this thing which has all the packages that I've installed. So if I go over to another machine, I just open up UniGet and then like just open up this file and then it installs all the same applications. So the thing is like you can 100% automate the setup of a Windows machine. The downside is it's primarily PowerShell, and I don't understand PowerShell. That is madness. It is so weird. I've tried. One day maybe I'll learn it, but I just don't care to or whatever. So that's what kind of sucks is if you want to automate, you have to use PowerShell. Hayden, were you going to say something?
So UniGet is great, and it's awesome that it pulls from the various package managers available for Windows. But yes, you're bringing up DevHome, and DevHome is building out its ability to import configuration files. They use a methodology called desired state configuration, DSC files, um, and these are now integrated with WinGet and allow you to basically not only do what UniGet does, but you'll be able to go even further and like preset window settings and like
Yeah. So
automatically
Sorry,
set it to
what is
dark mode.
DevHome?
Dev,
yeah,
do you want me to take that one?
yeah, go for
DevHome,
it. Try to
yeah,
explain DevHome.
DevHome is a all-in-one tool for getting started developing on Windows. It's from the same team that built WSL, Terminal, PowerToys. It lets you monitor, it gives you a dashboard for your GitHub repos, gives you resource utilization, allows you to create these machine configuration files, allows you to, there's currently a feature in beta that allows you to define a dev environment with natural language using Open API key. So you can actually go in and say, I'm going to build, this Node app with this and this, and it will spin up a Docker container with everything pre-installed, ready to go for you. It also has, they've also migrated a number of tools that used to just be in Power Tools over into DevHome. So they're now basically
Yeah.
pre-installed on Windows through
So
DevHome.
so so there's like what people don't realize is like there's this within Windows. There's like there apparently seems to be a group of developers or whatever who kind of like drank the Linux Kool-Aid or whatever. It's like all of the cool things that we've been doing in Linux of like declarative management of setting up our machines and stuff like that. They're supporting. They're bringing it all over to Windows, but it's like it's going at the pace. Like it's like DevHome when they first announced it was like it was very underwhelming and it's slowly getting better and I expect another because like the problem I have with DevHome, the reason why I haven't got into it is like because I'm a super lazy person and I definitely don't want to spend like a significant amount of time trying to learn like Windows specific things. So the cool thing about that I liked about UniGet was that like I can click and install packages and then it backs up and restores the state. Whereas right now in DevHome, the machine configuration is you've got to learn this DSC thing, and I have yet to figure this out. Like I like feedback for the Windows people or whatever is like the it seems like I don't understand. Like maybe if you come from a Windows background, these YAML files make sense to you or whatever, but they don't to me. And so I don't know how to like just type and create one, and then there's no tooling to create or manage them. So then it's like a significant amount of effort of trying to do this YAML based approach. But anyways, but it is there or whatever. So it's like this is kind of like the thing. It's like they're doing surprisingly good things. The Windows team to do that. So it's like you could, but like but Hayden, but things that like, because things that do drive me nuts is like when I log in, like if I create a new Windows machine, is like I've got to reconfigure the taskbar to be the way I want it to. There's like a handful of settings that I'll click around and I'll tweak, like not a huge amount of them. So it's like it's not that big of a deal because I can do it really quickly. It's like, oh, I know I want this, and this. But it's like, will it even manage those things, like taskbar settings and
It's getting there. The interesting thing about the team that built WSL, PowerToys, DevHome, Sudo for Windows is that they're most of these projects are fully open source and they're heavily community driven. So most of the PowerToys have come from the community and get promoted and then included in PowerToys. And feedback on things like DevHome are pushing it along quickly. So like the ability to more easily create DSC files from your current install, that they've heard that feedback and that's being worked on. So it when these things first like get announced at build, you see the first draft, but they're really building in the open in contrast with uh, where Microsoft would spend a lot of time and then announce it and then say this is just it. Um, Particularly this team at Microsoft.
Yeah, like
So
what I'm surprised with Microsoft is like the weird thing is like when I started in Linux, it was like Microsoft was the devil. Like you hated Microsoft, right? Like they were anti-open source. They were, and that opinion has basically stuck with a lot of Linux people, which is like, but like the weird thing is like in these days, if you look at the companies, Microsoft is actually the biggest, like they're the most embracing open source. I think of any of the companies like going forward. Like Google had a good run where they were like really big into open source, but didn't seem like it financially really worked out with them. That it seems like the tides are changing there. Um, but like Microsoft is like all in because like I'm surprised at things where it's like, for example, like they're like it took Microsoft apparently a couple decades to have a decent terminal, but they have a decent terminal now. That's what I was showing you here. But it's like things like I believe like terminal is completely open source.
it is. So is sudo. So is PowerToys.
Yeah, it's
Um,
like all of
yeah.
the new stuff that they're doing that I seem to care about is open source, which I love, um, because I can't stand it if I can't dig in and figure out how things work or whatever. But yeah, but I mean, Microsoft just has like this. Unfortunately, they have to deal with their legacy of
Yeah.
some bad things or people not liking them or whatever. So,
Yep. And it not just on the like Windows dev experience either, but also in the AI space. Um, Microsoft is constantly releasing new AI tools. I know you have some gripes about it, but things like the Onyx runtime.
I don't understand the Onyx, but yeah, but like the yeah. Oh,
Well, I think we lost Hayden.
yeah, he's in Vienna right now, so there's people watching. But like, this doesn't need to be like I'm not trying to sell everyone on Windows or whatever. But like, but it's like the like I wanted to do this of like show how I'm using Windows and try to not lose my Linux street cred. Like, trust me, I'm still a die, but it's been an interesting experience for me. Hayden, you
Yeah,
can.
I think it's just really interesting to see that workflow and how it works because, like I said, there are a lot of paper cuts on Windows. Like right now, I'm 95% running everything on Wayland, but then there's always that random X11 application that has to run through X Wayland,
Yeah.
and that it looks weird. The scaling's different, and then there's even the fragmentation between I run GNOME and GTK for most apps, but then a random Qt app pops up and that looks like dog shit too, and then I'm fighting with that. And
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, like I hate the UX design of GNOME apps. I just cannot stand. I think they are the most confusing. Like I'm a very like anyone who's anyone who's worked with me on developing UIs for like our programs or apps and stuff like knows how frustrated I get with UIs. Where it's just like I open it up and it's illogical to me, and it's like why in the world did you put like the way GNOME does their UX is basically like they just randomly throw icons in the top bar. It's just like random icons in the top bar, no description, don't know what they do. You have no idea why in the world they're in the top bar, but they're just there. Anyways, but
yeah,
Wayland is one of those things that irritates me too. Is the fact it's like every time I've tried to use Wayland, I run into issues. So it's like it's like probably in another like 5 years, they will finally ironed out everything. Like I think we're finally getting there. But you realize Wayland's been in development for over 10 years, I think. So it's like
yeah.
so this is what you have to get like with Linux is like you got to be in it for the long haul because it's like it's not going to be good for a couple decades. It's literally like a decade because like GNOME 3 for example was like they started it and it took about 10 years for it to get back to the same level as GNOME 2 in terms of functionality. And now within the last couple of years, like GNOME 3 is actually really quite good. Like it's really taken off in the last couple of years. There was some point of like Fedora 38. I can't remember which version. There was one version where it was very specifically like where it's like, oh wow, like GNOME has really gotten a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think GNOME 3 is the way forward. KDE is really nice. I actually like what they've done with the latest version of Plasma, but it's too Windowsy for me. And I actually like GNOME's UX with the buttons and the CSD and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I'm putting a lot of hope in Cosmic right now. I'm really excited to see what they bring out. But Wayland is still a huge pain point because, as Flatpak Flatpak is secure and it's great. Wayland is secure and it's great. But getting the two to work together, like you can't have the 1Password desktop app speak to the CLI process when it runs on Wayland because of all the sandbox, and then they have to build all these different portals. But those are coming out. It takes like 5 years per portal. If you look at all the issues that are open,
the
progress is so slow.
So the thing is, because you have to like the problem with kind of like Linux community open source driven things is that like open source it's volunteers, like a real community. So volunteers are going to work on fun shiny things. They don't work on like the annoying little bugs. So it's like you kind of have to have like a corporate, like a paid person to then squash all those little bugs. And so it's like that's why it's like Canonical did a decent job with like their 1,000 paper cuts project and stuff like that of squashing all the little annoying things. So Cosmic, I think, has a decent chance of becoming good because there is a financial incentive for them to squash all those bugs. Is like to actually like pay developers and fix all those annoying little things that drive people nuts because they need to sell hardware. So it's like I have a lot of hope in Cosmic. I unfortunately think they're making all the same mistakes that most engineers have done in this space, which is basically rewriting things that don't need to be rewritten, like taking on too much. They're taking on so much that it scares me that I don't understand how they're going to succeed because you start to realize like the amount of stuff they need to like by going this route of like having their own text editor, their own terminal, their own whatever. It's a lot of work. It's like,
yeah, but I think the reason they're doing that though is that I just complained about how I run GNOME and Qt apps annoy me, and they probably came to the same conclusion because Cosmic doesn't use GTK or Qt. They built their own entire UI rendering layer.
yeah.
So now they're building other applications to use that layer, and it's
so this is so. I mean, I'll see how it turns out because like basically this is so. I like. Because Canonical did the same thing where there was like they're basically kind of like screw the community, we're going to build our own technology. Like the thing that's weird is like the community seems to be much more accepting of the way System 76 is going about this, whereas Canonical didn't. It's probably just personality and branding and whatnot. But Canonical did basically the same thing where they're like we're just going to build our own thing, and that's what like Unity was, and they did Juju, and they've done a lot of Snap, a lot of projects where they're just like we're going to do our own thing, and so. The problem that happens is if you do your own thing and you don't get the community on board, the community is going to end up destroying you. Like because they can always like over a decade or whatever, they'll continue to grow to the point where it's like now you've fragmented or whatever. So I don't know I don't know why they needed to change GTK, but I do know I can totally understand GNOME Shell had a lot of issues, but why GTK? Why the whole thing? Why a text renderer? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's tech, but the problem is it's like I really hope because System 76 is the only company I see in the Linux ecosystem that has any chance of succeeding right now of like making the desktop usable. But like they're doing all the same things that everyone's done in the past that have kind of failed. So it's like whatever. I mean, maybe they'll finally be the one that succeeds, and I really hope they do. I really like the current version of Pop OS. So if they can reproduce that with Cosmic. But I try Cosmic about every a couple of weeks or whatever because like they made it ridiculously easy to compile and run, and it's got a lot of bugs. It's got a lot of bugs.
Yeah, I mean, it's still really early. I mean, they only just added not multi-monitor support, but the monitors have different scaling now, which I think is a really cool addition because not everyone buys the same monitor twice if they have 2 or 3 or whatever.
But it's that typical engineer thing where it's like, oh, I'm going to write this software, and you do the first 80%, and then you realize like the next 80% is where you spend all your time. It's like you can get the vast majority of the features that are like, oh yeah, look, it's almost done, and then that last bit of just ironing out all the issues and stuff is like what takes a significant amount of time. And so they've spread themselves really thin with the amount of stuff where it's like the amount of like you don't realize how much effort like if you look at the done like the notes app in Mac OS. The notes app in Mac OS is amazing. The amount of functionality that's in there. Like try doing drawing on, especially on your phone or whatever. Like, so you don't realize like these bigger companies, the amount of effort and engineering they put into these dumb side things. Microsoft's a little different with Notepad, but they have a whole replacement for it that's coming very soon, right? Like, aren't they finally replacing Notepad? But it's like, but the amount of effort they put into these little things, it's like significant. And so it's like I really think they've underestimated. But hopefully they prove me wrong. I mean, I want them to prove me wrong because like that was what I was hoping on. And then once I started trying out the alpha builds, I got really disenchanted. Just like, oh crap, they've got a long way to go. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be amazing, but it is definitely still early. But they're rewriting it in Rust, which gets them a lot of kudos too, right? So
yeah, I honestly, I always complain about Rust, and I like, I always like crap on Rust nonstop on Twitter. But I think Rust is the perfect replacement for the Linux user space of like, we have all of this legacy GNU style C code, which, I don't think a modern engine, like you have to be a very unique individual if you like that style and you want to maintain that. Like, so it's like, I'm all for bringing in kind of fresh, like new blood or whatever, and just rewrite the whole Linux user space in Rust. It's a perfect fit. Because no other language is really a good switch from all of this code that really kind of needs to be C or C++ or whatever. It's like you can't do it in Go. It just doesn't. It's not the right, So Rust, I'm actually all for everyone doing all this stuff in Rust. So I'm happy. Like I love all the stuff that's that people have been doing.
I think you've angered a few people by saying that System 76 is the only. I can't remember what your phrase was, but the only company that stands a chance.
Who else? Someone's upset.
So Alan says that Canonical's at their biggest headcount they've ever been.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Let me defend Popey here, and so I think his point was in response to one, Linux is just volunteers because companies like Canonical, Red Hat, SUSE, they're investing a lot in, upstream things, System D, GNOME, the user experience. I mean, when I was at Canonical and even after then, there was an engineer who did a lot of work upstream in GNOME to improve performance and squash bugs there. So that was his first point, that it's all volunteers. And then, I mean, I think it's a interesting sustainability question about whether or not 10-ish engineers, like, should we generally follow what Canonical, Red Hat, SUSE, and others are investing in GNOME, kind of in that direction, or should a small team break out and do their own thing? And he adds that he loves that they're innovating on the desktop, but it's an interesting sustainability question in the long term.
Yeah, and I think that because I don't know, like Canonical's like I don't understand Canonical's like what's going on with the desktop there, because it's like they scaled back significantly in terms of like I don't know. So I mean, does Alan work for Canonical?
I think he used to.
Previously did. We worked together.
No, you used to work for him or whatever. Where it's like, it's kind of like they're no longer like leading because Ubuntu is no longer. I I don't really. It's like Ubuntu still has the most practical polish of like, because they still seem like hardware compatibility, like squash. So Ubuntu is still doing all the grunt work, but they don't have like the best out of the box experience anymore. Where other distributions have like start like, because it used to be like Ubuntu, like every new version, it was kind of like exciting about how the desktop is changing, and Fedora has really taken over that. Where like Fedora is now the gold standard of the really the GNOME experience, but where I think Fedora fails is in of all of those tiny little like kind of paper cuts that Canonical addresses, and that's why I'm stuck with Ubuntu. Is because for the most part it just works. Like it's pretty hands off. You can just stick an LTS, keep auto upgrading the system, the system packages, and it works. So,
What
but
I
yeah,
and I don't speak for Canonical,
yeah,
but what I see happening is, Uni Desktop was very popular, but they ultimately made the economic decision to shift and kind of follow the pack and be
yeah,
more consistent with the other distros, and then bring their polish to that. So, for example, it's not default. It's not going to be the same default GNOME setup. It still has
yeah,
the dash to dock extension pre-installed. It has its own. It has a brand new out-of-box installer that's Flutter based actually.
Oh,
And,
nice.
and at a certain point, like there's certain things that just aren't like super exciting, but like it's got one-click Active Directory join when you set up a
I
new
actually just
Ubuntu
noticed
install.
that. I was very impressed with the Active Directory join that I was just installing, because I just installed 2404 on something or whatever. So I don't know. It's like it's kind of weird because it's like um, I just don't get the impression, but maybe I'm wrong. It's like because there's kind of like no active marketing. Like I feel like Canonical is kind of stopped trying to get desktop users. Like I just don't see the active. Whereas like System 76 is making a bigger deal about it or whatever. So it's like, so because like Linux is at a very small percentage of the market. So it's like how to get it to a larger market of people. Um, I
Well,
don't
I
know.
think I think that's partly just from our place as geeks. We see System 76, we see framework, but what we don't see, and you talk about Ubuntu's uh, kernel support,
Yeah,
is Ubuntu is one of the few companies who are partnering with the hardware companies and
yeah,
shipping Ubuntu certified hardware. So while yes, framework is great, love System 76, um, in terms of scale, in terms of actually who's still shipping the most, you
yeah.
know, Linux workstations and laptops through Lenovo, through HP, through Dell, um, it's still Ubuntu, and that's where the hardware support comes from.
Yeah.
Is those pre-release units, going to Ubuntu and then enabling those and certifying them prior to release.
But like I don't see Ubuntu changing the trajectory. I think that's like the problem. It's like maybe it's a slow growth business over time or whatever. It's like I just don't see it changing the land. It's just I don't know. There's just nothing of like why would the Linux desktop like more people switch to it? I don't know. It's a weird like at least like yeah, because I mean, there's kind of zero chance that like Linux will ever be super popular with a large consumer base, because it's just like at this point in time, like why most people are going away from laptops. Like a lot of people just don't even own a laptop, so it's like why. So I don't know. I guess you can almost look at it from like a doomsday perspective there. Like it's a dying market anyways, and so Ubuntu will just continue to grab whatever they can out of it, and there's just no shot for anyone. I don't know.
Well, I mean, Ubuntu is still the default on the major clouds. It's
Oh
still
no,
the
no. I mean
default on,
that's a
yeah.
whole different deal. Because like that's why I feel like is that Canonical. Like I'm not like pessimistic on Canonical in general. I think the desktop on the laptop. I think because they've clearly they have the server side And I feel like Canonical's put a lot of effort into the IoT, smart device and stuff like that. And so they have a good business there. Like their ARM support, like they were always the best for ARM support. So it's like Canonical in general. I think these other areas is like really good. It's like I use Ubuntu, like that's the only distribution I really actually use if I'm going to the cloud, desktop, or whatever. Whereas fooling with all of these. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's tackle something that George has brought up now. So he said that we've not talked about economics, which is true. And then he also says that we're terrible customers. And you're using Windows, which is a paid-for operating system, and a ton of proprietary software, of which you're probably paying for. But he's right. Like, where is the money flowing into Linux? Like, I'm not paying for GNOME. I'm not paying for my Silverblue install. Like, is this an economic problem? Like, should we be paying up more money for a better Linux desktop experience?
Well, I mean, obviously, yeah, it'd be great if people paid, but the thing is nobody pays for an OS really. So I mean, that's kind of that's the basic problem where it's like, sure, like you can get all the Linux nerds out there to feel guilty and pay money, or we want to help the world, so we pay money, but it doesn't really matter because the rest of it, like, it's not enough money. Like the larger market of people, like, so it's like it's a weird thing that's happened with the entire software industry or whatever. Is like you don't make money on software. You just don't. Like there's of course the legacy people, like the old proprietary, Oracle or whatever, who are still printing money off of software. But like the majority of software development these days is like you don't make money off of it, and it's like and ironically, the most challenging, difficult, the hardest technical problems you can solve in software is all given away for free now. It's all done in open source, and there's zero value to it. So it's like it's this weird thing. It's like, well, should you be paying for it? It's like, yeah, but like nobody pays for it. So like, why do enter? No, but these guys are like basically, it's like the Valve and Adobe. It's like the same people who have always been making money off of software are still making, but like anything that's like new, yeah.
I mean, I think we also have to accept that the quality of the software is different, right? Now, when I was on a Mac, I was paying for Raycast, which is probably the greatest launcher and the only piece of software I generally miss from my Mac. And I paid for a monthly subscription. And I look at my Linux app, and I don't think there's any software I'd probably even pay for, just because they're not as good. And I don't know if that's because they're all contributed to by volunteers and time is limited and such. Yeah. But nobody's ever entered like the actual proprietary software thing. So I think you're right to say there's no money in software, especially in a Linux ecosystem, but it doesn't mean that there shouldn't be longer term.
There's this kind of sad like reality with open source stuff where it's like people spend a lot of time in open source developing, and so they're like, well, I should be compensated for that time. So they say like, look, my time should be worth this much, therefore you should be paying for that. But like, unfortunately, it's like that's not the way, like, I don't know, economics works or whatever. It's like what you'll find is if you take your software that you've been giving away from free, like make it proprietary and say you have to pay $5 and see how many people will pay for it. Not many people will pay for it because they don't value it. That's unfortunate. Like that's the unfortunate reality is like people will use software that's free, but as soon as you have to pay for it, like they won't. But it really does come down to the fact that they don't get enough value out of it to pay for it.
Huh. Well, yeah. And the thing is right now, the number one customer who pays for Linux, even on Linux on the desktop, is enterprise. And as long as that continues, with maybe the exception of like System 76, as long as that continues, it's going to be their issues that get prioritized.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just it. So, when I started Penguin Linux, which was a bespoke WSL distro for WSL, we charged $5. I think it's now $10. But we basically offered a social contract with our customers where, yes, we know you could go download Debian or Ubuntu for free, but give us $5, $10 for this. We give you best effort support, and we make all these cool customizations optimized for WSL. This was also WSL 1 days when you needed a lot of those. And And basically, we were committed to what the community wanted, who'd paid for it, and we were able to do that by putting it in the Microsoft Store. And as Alan brings up, right now there's really no way to do that for Linux end user software.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not possible.
Yeah, with the Mac, you've got the Mac App Store. Windows, you've got the Windows App Store. Linux, I know
Yeah.
George says that they're working on FlatHub supporting payments, but
Yeah, but it's very tricky of like, because it's like, because if you build up an open source software and then you expect people to pay after the fact, like it's like it's been open source and then that like people most likely won't pay. It's like it works better if like it's like you're kind of charging from day one. You set that expect. I don't know. It's like charging for open source software is extremely difficult. I mean, it's like that's why like the startup I'm currently in, the startup we previously did, we do open source software. Like I love open source, but selling it is a very difficult, tricky thing. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't think because like going back to like what I was saying before is like why I thought like System 76 had like the best chance or whatever is like the reason why I put most of is because they're selling hardware. Is like that's the biggest thing. But maybe Canonical can do it with partnering with people, but it's still there's this weird thing that I don't think the hardware vendors are incentivized enough to make like they're kind of too much in bed with Windows. That I don't know, maybe it's not true, but like I don't know if they're really incentivized enough to make Linux good on their devices. But ThinkPads, they do it. Like ThinkPads are amazing with Linux.
Yeah, and there's some $40,000-$50,000 ML workstations from Lenovo that
Oh,
come with
yeah,
Ubuntu. So I mean, it goes all the way up the market. So
yeah. But it's a really tough business. So I definitely would not want to be in. Yeah. I mean, I worked at SUSE for a while or whatever. It's like just seeing like the whole Linux business. It's a tough business. It's because like most Linux companies, what they're selling is certification. It's hardware certification or compliance. Like with that's really what they're selling. Um, it's because that's what people require. So they're like not really selling the software because it's all open source and commoditized and freely available. But like companies need the certification and stuff or whatever. And yeah, it's a weird thing.
yeah, the support, the FIPS certification,
Mhm.
those kind of thing. Yeah.
It's like that's what people end up paying for. But yeah, I don't know. Well,
well,
it's been fun. I'm sure I pissed off enough people.
yeah, we've gone way over what we intended to do, but I think we've had some good discussions.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work that needs to go for Linux to have that year of the desktop. I think you should abandon your AI project and go build a software store for Linux now.
This is the thing. It's like I often think about. It's like if I had Russian cosmonaut money, would I like decide like because I love the Linux desktop and I would love to fix it. I would love to like, but it's like is it even worthwhile? I don't know. One of these days. Yeah.
I think we'll leave it. We'll leave it there. This is a to be continued. Let's look back in like 6 months or 12 months and see if
Yeah.
things have improved. But
Yeah.
yeah, and
I'll tell you how terrible Windows is. Now I'm back on. I've abandoned it.
I'm sure we'll get a tweet thread in 2 weeks
Yeah.
when you jump back onto Windows or Linux or Mac or whatever.
Yeah.
I do it on a rotation, so it's
We
just
can do
around in
the
circles.
follow up on Android and iOS. It's all the same. It's like all the same things there.
Right, awesome. Oh well, thank you both for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for everyone in the chat for your contributions. Alan, George, I'll reach out to you. I'm sure we should set up another session. You've got a lot to share as well. So.
I'd love to get in, have a conversation with him about because I really love what he's doing and like their stuff there.
Yeah. Amazing. All right, I'll catch you all later. Have a good day.
But